So Richard, welcome to this British fencing interview. I'd like to introduce you as Richard Kruse, arguably the best fencer that Great Britain has ever produced.
Well, Alan Jay would have something to say about that, but...
Well, I think the array of medals that we will look at and the history as we walk through your career hopefully will give some justification to that. I think, could we walk through... You've a great scrapbook of all your medals and the press cuttings and passes. Could we start by maybe just chronologically give context to people? Your career, you've had an amazing career over quite a period of time. 4 Olympic Games are clearly the kind of the pillars and that's based upon. Would you be happy to maybe walk us through your scrapbook? And at that point, we can pick out.
So in lockdown, because I've had nothing to do this last year, I went into the garage, and my mum had always made me keep, press cuttings from my results. Not even just English newspapers, but anything I could get. My mum made me keep it, and I never saw the point at the time. But now I've had time to actually make this scrapbook. It acts as a sort of good, CV, if you like, for the things I've done. So yeah, I'd love to talk you through it. Let's start with the front cover.
Excellent. So it's a good starting point.
Yeah. So this is the front cover. It was painted by someone in Scotland for a charity. So I thought I'd use that as the front cover. And the back cover was, do you remember before the London Olympics, we had the National Lottery had obviously invested a lot into athletes, and they wanted to do a little profile of me.
And that was others. On billboards?
Billboards, yeah, for about 2 weeks.
2
weeks, 3 weeks outside of all the sweet shops. So.
And did anybody come up to you and go, "Oh, you're the guy on the poster"?
Only the guy in the local corner shop, actually. I took him outside and said, look.
That's me.
And, okay, so I started fencing in '94, but I didn't really make any headlines until 2001. I did all the age group competitions, but 2001 was when I made the first breakthrough.
What can if you don't mind, as we go along, I may ask some questions. So what as a child, was it lots of sports? Was it just fencing? What?
Yeah, lots of sports. I had a lot of energy, so I think my mum took me to karate. I did karate for 3 years, but I did a bit of football, tennis. I was very sporty. And then fencing was just another thing I tried, because we knew Jamek in the neighbourhood. His daughter knew my daughter, my sister. They were the same age.
So Jamek was the coach from day one?
Yeah, so I was very lucky, fencing really found me. So that's how I got into fencing. And, that's quite lucky, really, considering lots of other people, they drive hundreds of miles, they go through coach after coach looking for the knowledge, whereas I really just, fell into it and took a shine to it. I've actually brought 2 medals. The first medal I ever won, and, if you're a British fencer, you'll go through the whole same, process of doing these little under 13 age group competition.
What's on the rear of that? What's on the back?
Well, this is 1995 Leicester foil. That was the first ever medal I won, so I was very proud to win that. I'd only been fencing about 1.5 years. I lost to Tristan Lane, who then became an epéiste afterwards. And then this was the first thing I actually... So that I won a silver, but this was the first gold I won. And I beat Gordon Jameson. This was the next year in Leicester. So I've got loads of these, as most British fencers do. I thought I'd bring the very first ones in.
Excellent.
But the first time I really made the headlines was when I became British champion in 2001, because I was the youngest men's foil champion to do it. It was just before I turned 18, so I was still technically 17.
And how many years would you say you had been really focusing on your fencing at that stage?
I've been fencing for 7 years, but perhaps the first 1.5 years weren't too, first year was perhaps once a week, and then I started to really take it seriously, up the training to, 3 times a week, 4 times a week.
So really
get the mileage in.
5 years of training. And then which is a pretty meteoric rise, really.
Yeah, it's because I started growing. Before I had a lot of skills, but I was still quite, small. And then all of a sudden I was, over 6 foot. And so I've put that in the scrapbook. And
so that's first mark was youngest ever British.
Yeah, youngest ever British champion, and that was me fencing James Beavers in the final, who'd just been to the Sydney Olympics. And then the following year, each year there was something quite interesting that would happen in my career. The following year, and I've kept this article from Hungary. It says in Hungarian, "Két döntős helyezés." It means 2 defining places. And it's when I lost to Lawrence Halstead in the final of the European Championships. And I've got that medal here.
So one British fencer beat another British fencer.
Yeah, it was ironic because I was beating Halstead like months before that in training. But we'd train hard together. I trained with Ben Montague a lot as well, who was another big name in British fencing, 20 years ago. And so I was second, and that's the medal from the European champs in Hungary.
Excellent. Just when you, something's probably worth making sure our viewers are aware of. You read us a line out of that Hungarian, if you can.
Okay.
A férfi tűrözők egyéni küzdelmével kedden reggel megkezdődött a 20 évi olói vívok.
And the reason Richard can do that is because you can speak how many languages?
I've studied Hungarian a very long time. As a hobby, I study languages. So I speak a bit of Arabic, basic Russian, quite good Hungarian, quite good Spanish. And English is my mother tongue. So yeah, it was a hobby of mine just to learn.
And I think that has held you in really good stead as you travel the world.
I think so, and I think especially Russian, in the fencing community, there's always someone from the old Soviet Union on the video, a referee, a coach, someone from the FIE. So to speak a bit of basic Russian, it actually opens doors in the fencing world. So, put politics aside and look for the linguistic benefits. So yeah, that was a huge step through. The first international medal for me. Great for Lawrence, winning Junior European Championships. And then the following year, I had a great season in 2002. I won Berg-Steinfurt, Junior World Cup, and I won Aix-en-Provence, another Junior World Cup. And then I got to the Junior European Championships, and I managed to win by beating Andrea Cassara in the final, who was already the senior European champion. So that was a great fight. I remember I won 15-14. This is the medal. I mean, the medal's not much. It's what it represents. I mean, you could go and buy something like that very cheaply.
No, it is a value.
And yeah, it got to 14-all, and the two of us just didn't want to back down because he was the senior European champion. I just didn't want to lose because I'd lost the year before. And I remember we just clashed, one light to me.
You mentioned Cassara there. Obviously, your career and his career have followed each other. He was Olympic champion in London team.
No, London and in the team and Athens.
Athens
team,
as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting. There's a number of in the time that I have been involved with you, knowing those athletes who I think your generation. There's been quite a golden generation who have shown the longevity.
I think so. Through. I mean, you've got Peter Jopik, who's won 4 world titles. You've got Andrea Cassara, who's won 35 World Cups, which is the record to date. And then you've got Lepeshu, 15 World Cups. So yeah, of course, Andrea Cassara has achieved way more than me. But I think in the head-to-head, we're probably quite equal now.
And I think it was a generation that was very strong. I think
for sure, that was a strong generation.
Very strong generation. So it adds value to what you have won along the way.
Okay, so then fast forward to 2004. Now there wasn't much on this. I had to get this off the official website. I qualified for the Olympic Games in Ghent, in Belgium, the European qualifier, just like the qualifiers that are coming up this weekend. Very stressful tournament, very strange tournament. You have to be a bit of a poker player.
Just give us the context of how that event works.
So anyone who hasn't qualified, so people who haven't qualified off the world ranking or through the team, each country is allowed to send one person in the continent to fight off. In this case, it was 2 places. This one coming up is only 1 place. So I had to make the final 2 to win.
Last chance saloon, really, isn't it?
And yeah, there were some, amazing people there. There was Motzek. If I have a look, there's who else have we got? We got Marshy from Hungary, already made a final in Sydney. Tomaror, Roland Schlosser, loads of good people. And it was a great day's fencing for me. Everything just fell into place at the right time. And it was an interesting build-up. Before that, Jamek my coach, had gone to the World Championships with the juniors. And so there was no one to fence with. So all I did to build up for that was I went to the fencing cell and I was by myself, no one was training, and I just did footwork, just a bit of work on the lunging pad for 2 weeks. I just imagined I was fencing, almost sort of hypnotized myself to just envisage what I was going to do. And then I fenced, one of the best days fencing of my life. So yeah, it's quite a funny, ironic.
In that as well, is there, giving an insight, you're very well structured and organized person and fencer in the sense that you always make the best out of what you have. So you've never moved abroad to live and train. You've trained in the UK. You've always struck me as somebody who's very makes real efficiency in terms of whatever opportunity you have. Is that something you think has held you in good stead all the way through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Access to a world-class coach. Yeah, we were a little bit light on sparring partners, but we did, even though I didn't live abroad, we did a lot of training camps abroad, and Jamek got us into Poland a lot of times. I know now it's very easy to go to Poland to one of these training camps, but back then it was very closed, you know, it was Eastern Europe. It wasn't, you know, it was a very different...
you had to be invited.
You had to be invited, you had to know someone who had a way in.
Yeah.
So we'd go to Poland, sometimes Christmas, usually over summer, and we'd train there. And then we did a whole range of training camps around Europe. And then towards the end of my career, because of this venue, for one thing, and because we had a pretty good squad, all the Poles, Ukrainians, Hungarians, Austrians, they all started coming here. So it was an incredible turnaround towards the end, where we'd have to go abroad for the knowledge, and then all of a sudden our squad had got it to a good enough standing that they wanted to come and train with us. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right, so that qualified me for the Athens Olympics. And then I've, in the scrapbook, I've put the accreditation and the participation medal. And yeah, this was an incredible event, because in fencing you go from being in a minority sport to all of a sudden having, you know, VIP treatment. I've kept this this article, you know, I'm there with Amir Khan, Tim Henman, Chris Hoy, Matthew Pinsent, and there's Richard Kruse here. I mean, it's just an amazing change from being, you know, a sport that's not really getting much coverage to all of a sudden in the Olympics you're centre stage.
And being part of that Olympic experience, does it make you, my memory of it is it gives you a really good insight into seeing what other people are doing, makes you feel much more part of that greater community, because you say fencing, you do feel somewhat outside of that circle of the sports with a lot of money. But did you enjoy that experience of being involved?
Absolutely. You know, we were part of the greatest show on earth. I was lucky as well. I had a World Student Games the year before, so I already had a chance to experience a multidisciplinary event and not get too overwhelmed, you know, walking into a massive stadium for an opening ceremony, not getting too distracted. So that 2003 World Student Games in Korea, in South Korea, was a good little warm-up, and then the Olympics, I was sort of ready for it.
Because it's a huge cultural shock to you when you go into that
and
space.
it can be overwhelming as well. You know, I know some people, you know, weren't happy at all with performing in the Olympics. They thought it was a bit too much of a circus. But
yeah, a lot of distractions, a lot of pressure, and it is difficult to just keep one's focus on the task in hand. You know, give a sense of what inside the Olympic Village is like in terms of the space and the...
Well, you've got 15,000 people. The Olympic Village will vary from time to time. In Athens, I think it was just two-storey accommodation they built, so it was actually spread out over a large area. But all the rest of them have been tower blocks, so they're a bit more, you know, penned in. Yeah, it's a funny environment. So you go and eat in the dining room.
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and you know, again, this is one of the pitfalls people fall into. They eat too much food. They stay in the dining hall too long. They start celebrity, you know, spotting, because you'll see a lot of celebrities come in that you've known, like you know, I think Maria Sharapova was there. There were a lot of famous people you could recognise. I think the best thing to do, because fencing's on early, you just stay focused, blinkered, eat your food, do your training, do your competition, and then you can relax.
Enjoy afterwards, absolutely.
Let's have a look at the tracksuit then. I brought all the Olympic tracksuits. I brought all my props with me.
Great.
So
these run from, first one was Athens 2004 through to Rio in 16.
So you might remember Amir Khan or Kelly Holmes wearing that Olympic tracksuit from Athens. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, again, like the medal is just a piece of metal. This is just a piece of cloth, but it does represent being an Olympian.
Hugely emotive.
Yeah, being part of the fraternity of, you know, Olympic sports. And then after that, after having been an Olympian, I remember I got sponsored by Visa, which was probably the best job I've had to date. They just gave me some money and they told me to turn up at a function and have a beer, mingle with all the Visa people, keep the VIPs happy, and then we'll give you a wheelbarrow full of money for it. And yeah, it was really good for networking. You know, I was on the scheme with Tom Daly, Mo Farah, Steve Redgrave, Tanny Gray-Thompson, all these like massive names in British sport, or people that weren't big names that became big names. And yeah, so the doors started to open after having that status of being an Olympian. And then, disaster, I didn't qualify for the 2008 Olympics. You know, I was definitely Olympic level. I missed out by 1 point, and I still don't really know how I messed it up actually. But so I thought I'd lost out. A month before, I got a phone call saying the host nation places that the Olympics have, weren't used by China. China was so strong they qualified a full contingent, and therefore they had to reallocate them, and those host nation places, one of them found its way to me.
Fantastic.
And I think we should mention also the late Keith Smith, who had a very high position. A good friend of mine, actually, a very, very good ally of mine, Keith Smith. He had a high position in the FIE. He was the head of referee delegates. And apparently the gossip is the FIE wanted a bit of diversity, so they gave those 8 host nation places out to complete random people. I think someone was from Ivory Coast, or just random places
to spread the geographic.
Yeah. Burkina Faso, I think, was another one. But really, I don't think that was a good idea. And a lot of people put in complaints, including Keith Smith. So they came up with another way to do it by looking at everyone who'd missed out on qualification by one place in the zonal, and then looking at their world ranking across all weapons, all continents. And then they gave one to me, they gave one to Samuelson in épée, one to Indra Angad Gower in the foil. So it went to people that could fence and, gave something to the Olympics.
But you had a month to get ready.
Had a month to get ready, yeah.
Which is not a lot.
It's not a lot. Let's have a look at the tracksuit. So, yeah, I was a little bit lucky to get that one, even though I still maintain I was...
Where were you ranked in the world that
23.
year? Okay, so you were thereabouts.
I was, I think I was good. There we are. Beijing Olympic tracksuit, a little bit more basic than the other one.
You can see that the lion really starts to come into its own in terms of an icon.
You see the passion in the Olympics, the amount of people that have you've got Olympic rings tattooed. You see people with the British lion tattoos.
Yes, it is. For me as an Olympian, it's a very emotive symbol. Yeah. Everything around it, and it's something I think we're blessed to be part of that family.
Yeah. You always get a participation medal for the Olympics, so that's where it is. And then this is the accreditation which you need to access the athletes' village and dining hall and the events and everything.
When you're given your accreditation, to me that's always a really significant point.
Yeah, at the airport when you get there, you get.
Yeah, suddenly you all of the selection, and then you train and you worry about getting injured and you worry about being ready. But actually, when you land and they give you that,
and they tell you, don't give your accreditation to anyone. Yeah. Don't let it out of your sight.
Yes.
And that reminds me of another story. When we come on to the London Olympics, remind me that...
we'll come back.
I've got to tell you a story about someone who lost their accreditation.
Okay.
So moving on to 2009, this was a huge breakthrough in my career. So I won my first World Cup, which was in Copenhagen. I've got all these medals out of the garage as of last week. They were just sitting in a shoebox. So that's a gold medal. It's been a bit oxidized. But that was the first win in Copenhagen. And then a few weeks later, I was second in Paris, which is actually still one of my regrets, not winning Paris. It would have been good to have the photo
Paris
up.
Being one of the iconic, if not the iconic.
Yeah, the iconic one, 5,000-seater stadium. So unfortunately for me, I lost to Jopic in the final. But, it was a good day's fencing. And then a few weeks afterwards, I won in Venice, which was... It was a special year in Venice. It was some kind of, I don't know, it was like the 25th anniversary or something. And for whatever reason, the final wasn't in the sports hall. So the organisers put us on a speedboat, took us over the canals, and then, over to one of the other islands where I think we were in the Marriott, and we had a sort of showcase final, the 4 of us. Yeah. And then, I remember I won. I beat Glonek from Poland in the final, who's probably, in my opinion, maybe controversially, probably the best fencer in men's foil not to go to an Olympics.
Okay.
And if you have a look at the picture, I remember I was given some Murano glass, some very expensive Murano glass, like gold-plated, painting on.
So if we take the win in Copenhagen and the win in Venice as a real breakthrough, what would you put that down to? Was there any significant? Was it just a maturity in terms of your fencing, your skills?
I think maturity. I was getting better, and then also a lot of people retire after the Olympics.
Yes.
And some people have a break. So a few people arguably were missing. We had Baldini that was out because of the controversy with his drugs, and then when Clyde Brink was taking a break because he was Olympic champion. So a few people, and then Sanzo did stop. So a few people stopped, and it's sort of a changing of the guard. And I was on my way up throughout anyway. So I felt it was my time to win.
And did you feel in your career as you went along that you're a very inquisitive fencer? When we talk about fencing, you're a really deep thinker about it, and you see it as a puzzle to solve. did you feel all the way through your career that you're just constantly refining and finding new things and challenging yourself? Or
absolutely.
What is that motivation?
And especially because the FIE kept tinkering with the rules. You know, every few years there was a change to the rules. You know, up until 2004 it allowed flicks, and then they took out the flicks. It made it almost a completely different sport. Then they put in the video replay, and that sort of changed things. They put in the target, you know, in the bib, because people were turning up with these massive bibs. There was always something they were tinkering with, and there were new things to learn along the way.
And do you think is that to my mind, that's something that you benefited from, in that you're inquisitive and you adapted to those changes?
At first, those changes weren't too popular, especially when they changed getting rid of the flicks. The first year after that completely put a spanner in the works. In 2005, people really had to learn a new game. So I wasn't that pleased at that time. But yeah, I always adapted to them. You know, I always was discussing things with my squad, with Jamek, my coach, you know, as to how we can then adapt the tactics. And what I was going to say about this glass was that one of the third place finishers, Joubert, he was given the glass. He didn't realize it was valuable, and he was really upset. He came third. He thought, you know, he should have won, made it to the final. So he went out the back and he smashed this piece of glass, and it's, you know, worth like 500 quid or something.
Whoops, in anger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, what else have we got? Singapore Masters. So at that point, I was invited to a lot of showcase events, and this was a great competition. You know, we did one in Paris, we did one in Singapore. They didn't count for anything in the FIE, but you know, it's still a good bit of training.
And there were exhibitions.
Exhibitions, really? Yeah, by invite only. And there was often a bit of money on the table. You know, usually it was something like 10 grand for the winner. But what the fencers used to do was, we used to get together and sort of divvy up the money beforehand. And I remember there's a funny story with this. So I won some money and I was supposed to give some to Baldini. But I thought, if I just stay quiet for a while, you know, what's going to happen? So a few months went by, and then eventually Baldini, you know, accosted me in Shanghai through Martino Emanuele, who could speak Italian. And he basically said, "You've got to give me the money." So I went to the bank. I had to transfer something like £3,000 to Andrea Baldini. And you know what they're like in the bank. They ask a few security questions to make sure you're not doing it under duress. And so they looked at it and said, "Oh, Andrea Baldini, old flame, sir, in Italy, an old girlfriend?" I said, "Oh, no, it's a man, actually." He said, what can I put down the transactions for? Is it business? I said, "Oh, it's just his gambling debts."
Excellent.
And I remember another time I won some money, and I think I'll come on to it later, it was the combat games. And, you know, you get an envelope full of, you know, a few $1,000s or something. And I took it back to UK, and I went to the Bureau de Change. And I said to the guy, "Right, can you change that to sterling?" And he thought I was some kind of drug dealer. He took me aside, he said, "You can have this, you know, more dollars in the future. Can we do some kind of deal?" I said, "It's a one-off." And then afterwards, we had the Olympic test event, which was called London Prepares.
So this was pre-London, just to test the venue, to test the systems.
Yeah, that's right, in 2011. And, you know, it was a very strange thing. The team seemed like it was quite set. It was going to be me, Halstead, Ed Jeffries, Kemba, and the whole thing changed just before.
Incredible.
Because I think some people lost form, there was an injury.
So what year was that? That was 2011?
This was, 2011.
2011, okay. And the team that actually then went to the Olympics was hugely
quite
different.
Because some of the kids came through, there were injuries, there was loss of form. And, you know, again, this didn't count for anything, but it was just good to be in front of a home crowd and to win something. Yeah, that's why I've included it.
And that's such an iconic photograph, the photograph of
with
you,
Regine,
on your knees. That's wonderful.
They've put it up there, haven't they?
Yeah, it's in the foyer at Leon Paul Centre.
And that was the medal, the London Prepares medal.
And how did you feel? How did you feel about a home games? I suppose you're in the luxurious position of having been to a couple of Olympics abroad. Whereas for some people I've spoken to, that was their only games. The home games was kind of, it was odd because it wasn't the full experience, but it was a very different experience.
It's a mixed bag, my feeling about home games. You have the sort of safety net of having the 8 host nation places. So I always knew throughout that cycle it would be a bit easier to qualify. Because, you know, if I didn't qualify, I'd probably get a host nation place. But then, you know, it was all the politics. You know, there were about 4 court cases with people complaining about the decision, suing British fencing, trying to get it overturned. It was too much of a circus. I think for me personally, London put on a superb Olympics. I'll admit that. But for me personally and selfishly as an athlete, I think if it had been Paris, considering I qualified properly, if it was Paris, it would have just allowed me to just,
Yeah, I think it must have a very different focus in your mind and different pressures. Yeah. That's interesting. I've heard various different reactions to that.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you. Well, hang on. So let's go through the story of how I qualified for London, because that's quite an infamous story. So it looked like I was going to qualify on ranking, and then it came to the last A grade in Bonn. And I went out on the first day, and I hardly ever go out on the first day. My whole career, I've been out on the first day 6 times, but that was one of them. And the only person that could catch me was Herzig from Ukraine, and he managed to get the result he needed. He managed to finish 3rd, albeit with a slightly nice, it's convenient draw. He had a Ukrainian in the 64. He had a Russian that I think let him through after this. But then he won 2 fair matches and got through. And then I thought, oh God, I've blown it. I've got to go to the European qualifier. And he came up to me and Jamek, and he said, look, I wanted a gentleman's agreement with you. It turns out there's one more tournament. There's a B grade, a little satellite event in Copenhagen. And we've done the maths. If you win it, you can then overtake me and qualify. He said, look, I don't mind if you want to fight me for it, but at least be honest. If you're not doing it, then we don't want to waste our money by sending people. So we didn't know anything about this. We said, oh, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do it. So he went to this event. He brought a friend with him, Coltigo. Their aim was just to stop me winning the thing. Yeah. And I was fencing terribly on the day, but I just stood there. I just scrapped my way through every match, and I managed to win and overturn the thing. And people ask me if I feel bad about it. We were fighting for a legitimate place, but he was quite broken after that. He didn't qualify. Yeah. And actually, he's another one. He's another candidate for best fencers that haven't been to
he's a good, very good fencer.
Yeah. And the story was that the Ukrainians had already assumed they'd qualified. They got a budget. And then when they told the sports minister, oh, our guy hasn't qualified, he tore up the cheque, £500,000 in front of the coach's face.
But I don't think there's any space for you to feel guilty on that.
We were fighting for a legitimate place. As far as I was concerned, I'd qualified on a wild card for Beijing. I didn't really want to do it twice, for my own sense of well-being.
But if the rules say there are these competitions and these competitions count, then you have to follow that. You have to follow that journey, and you have to go through all those competitions until the points are finished.
And rumour has it that that's why the FIE have now changed when the satellites are. All the satellites at the beginning of the season.
Yes.
And it's because of what I did. And they didn't have the control over the referees and the satellites.
Okay.
So they weren't happy that, I basically used this B grade as a...
Well, if the rules say you get points, then that's fine.
Nothing illegal, nothing wrong.
No, absolutely. I would say quite the opposite, Richard. I'd say it clearly shows that you had the focus to see that through. So,
this is the tracksuit, the Stella McCartney one, which got a bit of criticism at first because they were sort of tampering with the Union Jack, changing the colours. But it's a nice tracksuit.
Yeah, no, it was. I think that raised the perception around everything else with London.
And this was the first time, they started selling the stuff commercially, like you can buy an England football shirt. Yeah. So the funny thing is, if you wear this around London, no one thinks you're an Olympian. They just think you've just gone to the gift shop to buy it.
Yeah, but I suspect it probably has a different label where you have Stella McCartney on there.
Actually, I think James Davis told me there's a subtle difference.
Yeah, I think
so you can spot a real one.
Something like that label, it probably doesn't say Stella McCartney. It probably just says Adidas on the one you get in
official merchandise. Yeah. All right, I'll tell you the story about James Honeybone and him losing his accreditation. So we're in London. We'd finished our events, so you get invited to all these little club houses, and we were somewhere having a drink in one of these private parties. And James Honeybone had an accreditation. You collect all the pins around the outside. It was starting to rub him. So he said to me, can you put that in your bag? So I said, all right. Now, you're not supposed to do that in the Olympics. You're supposed to keep that accreditation.
Never let go.
For security reasons. Yeah. So I put it in my bag, and then we both forgot about it. We went our own ways. I got back to the Olympic Village first, completely forgot I had his accreditation in my bag. I went to sleep, and then I got a call from James Honeybone saying he'd been... He'd got in a lot of trouble because instead of just calling me to try and get me to give him the accreditation back, he'd tried to blag his way into the village. So the bloke, the security guy from G4S, thought some British prat had turned up in the full kit without the accreditation that was trying to worm his way in the village.
Yeah,
and then that wasn't the worst bit. The worst bit was, because they kept arguing, and then the G4S guy phoned Mark England, the head of the BOA, who's now the head of the BOA. So he woke him up at like 2 or 3 in the morning to get him through. I had to bring his accreditation. We got a little bit of a,
no, rule number one, never ever, never let go of your accreditation.
That's yours, you know, for security
absolutely.
reasons.
And it is absolutely your identity for that period of time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What else? World Combat Games was another thing. Again, it's just an exhibition, but still, you know, a few grand on the table to play for. And the medal I got from that was actually quite a nice one.
So that was in?
That was in St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, yeah.
And it was like I think they went bankrupt, Sport Accord, but it was like a sort of rival Olympics. Mm-hmm. It was the combat games. It was all these combat events that aren't, you know, things like Aikido and samurai, sumo, all these sort of wrestling events. So I went with James and we got to watch a lot of martial arts and then won this, you know, a bit of training as well.
Excellent.
They always say the weight of a medal is...
the gravitas.
Is what gives it gravitas, yeah. So that was a nice little chapter. And then, as you can see, I'm a king of the exhibitions. If only I could do it under pressure, I tell you. We went to Baku for a competition, which was, again, it didn't count for anything in fencing. And that's the medal.
But there was this hugely significant result for the British team?
Yeah, this wasn't the individual. This was actually a British team effort. We won the team men's foil. Now, other sports were really fighting harder here because, not in fencing, but in other, you know, judo, canoeing, all these types of other events, you could actually qualify for the Rio Olympics. Mm-hmm. And fencing, the reason we were thrown out of this is because the FIE weren't prepared to make it a qualifier. And they weren't prepared to make it a European Championships either. But it was a great event. It was a multi-sport event. Mm-hmm. And we actually pulled together. We won something. But we were training through because we had a World Championships about 2 weeks later. And that was a crucial World Champs for us for the qualification for Rio. And we got the result we needed. We finished 5th.
Yes.
So, you know, I trained through this. It was just a chance to spar with other people. Mm-hmm. But we ended up winning the team event.
Excellent.
And then moving on to 2016, this is the team in Bonn, Lawrence, Marcus, James, myself and Andre Klushin, that was the team manager.
So talk us through that final qualification for...
Final qualifier, we'd done most of the legwork. I mean, we were virtually in. We were 95% sure of qualifying. But there were still some permutations that could have seen us...
And what did you have to do to make sure that you were...
It wasn't so much what we had to do. We had to just make sure Germany didn't win the thing, and China didn't come second.
And it was in Germany.
And it was in Germany, and we had Germany in the first match. Got to 44 all, and unfortunately James, even though he won the competition the day before, the individual, he couldn't convert. So we were knocked out, and then we just had to sit and wait and hope the right permutations. And Germany lost to France, so Le Péchou managed to beat Yopik in the last match, and so that was good for us. And then we just had to watch China lose, and you know, luckily for us, China went out. But you obviously can't support it because it would be unsporting.
I remember watching it on the day, and it was just, I think it's awful watching. There are different ways to qualify, but that's the most painful way when it's out of your hands. Although if you're only in that position because you've done the work beforehand. Yeah, sure, I agree. It's a whole season's result, but it did come down to us hoping the right teams won and lost. Horrible, absolutely horrible. But we did it. And then we were, just before we went to Rio, then I had a good return to form, and this is quite an interesting story. So I won the Grand Prix in Havana. So there was quite a large large time frame between winning the last thing. I won in Copenhagen 2010, the last world ranking event, and there was 6 years in between that and me winning the next one. Even though, you know, I had a lot of near misses. I was second in Seoul, 15-14 to Baldini. I had a lot of, you know, near misses, a lot of bronzes, silvers, but I didn't actually win anything until there. And it was in Cuba, and I like the headline. I've kept the thing. Lord Britannico, revestido en oro. What is it?
I don't know. British Lord, revestido, reveling in gold. I don't know. Covered in gold. Covered in gold.
So you're a lord.
Lord Kruse, yeah. And so my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was there at the time. And after I won, she came on and hugged me, and it caused a real, you know, bit of controversy because she had a good job in the government. She worked for the government ministry, and it's because of the Cold War with, you know, communists and the capitalists. It's a real taboo for someone in that position to be in a relationship with a gringo.
Yeah, to be in contact with somebody
the
who's
enemy.
not. Yeah.
So and her boss saw it on television because it was on terrestrial television, and he wanted to actually bring me in for an interview. He wanted to see, who's this guy, who's Lord Kruse? But in the end, it was all right. But,
and that lady became your wife?
Yeah, incredible.
And you were married in Cuba?
Yeah, we were married in Cuba.
On the beach in Havana?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Saved me a packet. And then we went to the Olympics. And again, always keep the participation medal and the accreditation. And, you know, a dream almost came true, but unfortunately, I was edged out 15-13 for the bronze.
What's your emotion about that after these years? We've talked about it a couple of times.
It was really funny. We literally went to Heathrow, not knowing which team we were going to fence in the individual, because right up until a few weeks before, there was a question, is Russia going to be banned from the Olympics? No one knew if they would be or wouldn't be. In the end, Seb Coe banned them from athletics, but you know, Thomas Bach sidestepped the decision, decided that the individual sports would decide. And, you know, in fencing and in the other sports, they were allowed to. But we literally didn't know if Russia were going to be there or not because of all the controversy. You know, I had mixed emotions about it because as an athlete in a championships, if you get a personal best, you can't be angry with yourself. But then at the same time, you can't stop, you know, thinking,
if only,
two more matches, Olympic champion, one more match, Olympic medal. Probably best not to think too much about it, but...
Incredible achievement.
Yeah.
I have to think if it's something like 0.000007 of the population will ever go to Olympic Games, and whatever then the extrapolation of that is who will ever win an Olympic medal, and to be that close is just incredible. Yeah,
and that was the tracksuit for the Rio Olympics, and that had this very interesting feature. They gave you your service medals, so it was my 4th Olympics, so I had 4 little tags on it.
Great. And did you go around looking at other people's?
Yeah, I think everyone in the in the BOA headquarters where we were staying,
What was the most? Was there a 5?
There was someone with a 6. I got into a lift with a very sort of horsey person, you know, very.
Yes.
Hoorah,
Mary
Henry
King
kind of
or somebody.
Yeah,
maybe one of the one of the.
I think he'd done 6.
Nick Skelton, somebody like that.
Yeah, I think it was him. Yeah. You know, so
fantastic.
Quite incredible. But yeah, people did notice I'd racked up a few Olympics. So yeah.
That's great.
Right, and then a little bit of a winning spree afterwards. So after, I don't know what happened. I really came into some form over the next 3 years.
Had you changed anything significantly in terms of what you're doing training-wise, or load, or?
Not really, but I had decided to step back from the team, and I was in a good position in the top 16. So all of a sudden, I wasn't doing the first round, which you know is quite a hard thing to get through now when there's 250 people in an A grade. I wasn't doing the team event, so I was just going in, and I was really training for 6 matches, winning 6 matches. I used to do it in training all the time. I knew the 15-hit format inside out. I forgot 5s. I just learned that format, how to win 15s, and I'd literally just target these events, go in, win 6 matches on the bounce, and this was one of them when I won it in the Westgate shopping mall. Got a nice trophy, and. Yeah, we just started banging out some victories. The next one was Cairo, 2017.
And that was, talk us through how were the presentation on that final.
That was really surreal. I remember I was fencing, and then Tofilidis came up to me and he said, Richard, you're going to the pyramids today. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, haven't you heard? The top 4 is in the pyramids. And, you know, to be honest, from an athlete's perspective, I don't really like it when they start, you have to pack your bag up after the top 4, go 2 hours to a different venue, then, reset. I don't really like that, but this was quite incredible. So packed the bag up, went in the bus, literally 2 hours across Cairo. It was, massive city, very busy. And we got to the pyramids. They just set up a piece in front of the Sphinx. And then I had 2 matches there. I beat Carlong Chung from Hong Kong, and then Alessio Facconi from Italy in the final. And I remember it was like some kind of dream. I was fencing. You might have had one of those dreams. You're fencing and then, oh, hang on, I'm knee-deep in water. Something wrong, it's a dream. And it was like that, I felt a breeze, desert air going through the piste, sand on the piste being blown in. It was outside, but it felt like inside because it was dark and there were lights. So it felt like you were inside. I know it's a little bit strange.
And the backdrop of the Sphinx in the
pyramid.
The
backdrop of the Sphinx, absolutely surreal. So
incredible.
I think that's one of the most memorable things to win. And then the next year I went back to Shanghai. One in Shanghai, got another one of these little doorstops.
Excellent.
And then finally it came, the world's medal that I'd been chasing all those years. So it was me and Jamek there. And, you know, I've kept this article from the sword. If I reach over for the medal, I've finally got one of these.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's a weird contradiction if you look at an Olympics or a World Championships. It's a smaller event. You know, the Olympics has 36 people in. The World Championships, you know, 4 per country, 150 people. But the people there are trying harder. They're in better form. So is it a harder tournament or is it an easier one? It's probably the pressure.
It is. Yeah, I think it's a different perspective. My sense, having been privileged to be at that event with you, was that it put a validation to everything you'd done. It was, you know, the Olympics has this incredible. It is the pinnacle really in sport, but in many ways, you know, to be a world champion is more meaningful. I think, in given the context that you've given, and I thought that was on that particular day, and the reflection afterwards was, I thought it just validated all that we see in front of it, and kind of without that, it would have been a gap. But I think to have that medal is so significant.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was good to do it at least once.
And you fenced. We were talking earlier. You some of the quality of the fights you had, particularly in the finals, in the Labrador fight, were just, you were on a fantastic level.
It was a great fight, but it took so much out of me. So when I got to the final for Konya, I could feel, you know, a bit of fatigue had set in. You know, whereas I could do it quite easily in the World Cups. Maybe it's nerves as well, but it just feels like you use a bit more energy in an Olympics and a World Champs for everything.
Yes.
And I remember having a game plan against Vaconia, so just hit him with some cheap shot and then just close up shop. And I did. I hit him with a little, you know, attack from Preem, and then I remember closing the door and went 6-3 up, but sadly I couldn't hold it in the final. So, but at least, you know, at least I got a medal in my career from the World Champs, which was definitely missing. When I got to the top 8, I had to fence James Davis. So at that moment, British fencing knew that, you know.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember meeting Stéphane Marcelin, who I know, the French team manager, and just saying to him, you know, we have a medal. Which is great, which was hugely significant. Difficult, you know, which is your favourite child, you know, between you and James. But I think it was great. That was a really momentous moment, I think, for us all.
Next one, and then what have we got? We've got Bonn. When I fence Kassara, I mean, it's the same names that crop up on the podium. But
so if you take when you beat Kassara, the first competition you talked about was in what year?
In the European Champs, 2002.
Yeah, 2002, and there we are in
2018, I think. Late
incredible.
Yeah, it's
incredible.
It's like a soap opera all the way through.
Absolutely. And that fight, I that was probably one of the fights that I was privileged to witness. That was one of the most amazing fights. I thought that he at that stage, he kind of succumbed to your mastery. It was just, you were both on, you know, 6th, 7th intention. If anybody watches that fight, it was a superb fight.
Some days, you know, you can't miss a shot. And I remember through all the matches I had, I felt pretty dominant that day. And then it came to Kassara in the final, and I think I went something like 8-3 up. I was really, you know, ahead of him. And then he caught up, and I thought, oh, am I going to lose it? And then I found, you know, second wind, and I managed to, you know, win 15-11 in the end.
But he was just full of. He wasn't angry or disappointed because he knew you had been so good on that day?
Yeah, I get the feeling when it was 14-11,
yeah.
I remember I put a line out, and I think he had given up. He just, oh, solid. So yeah, it was a good day's fencing. And actually, that was my first World Cup, Bonn, in 2001. So
first one you ever competed in?
Senior World Cup, that was the first one. And, you know, it was always one I wanted to win because it was...
And what was the first year you competed?
I did it in 2001.
2001.
So it was literally 20 years, 2001 to 2021 in Doha, when we just...
That's incredible. What is the driving force? What's the resilience? What is it that, you know, that's a long journey of sacrifice, emotional, physical, financial. What is it that, did you have to reset? You know, did you have a plan? You go, I'll do a season and then I'll recalibrate and think and reset, or was it just... How did you motivate yourself through that?
I think one of the things that kept me motivated was probably, you know, ironically, not getting this too early. You know, I was actually quite close to getting a World Championships medal in 2003. I lost to Jopic in Cuba, 15-13. And I just think if I would have got that, maybe that would have taken the edge off, you know, wanting to carry on. Maybe if I had got the bronze in Rio, maybe it probably would have retired.
Yeah, I remember you saying that after Rio. I remember you saying that maybe it's a good thing because it'll push me on for the next few, which I thought was a fantastic statement.
If you look at, apart from Garozzo, Garozzo's a different case because he didn't win anything up until Rio, and then he won a lot afterwards. But if you go back, the last 5 Olympic champions, in men's foil haven't actually won anything after winning the Olympics. You know, once you get to that level, it's actually quite hard. Winning after winning is hard. So maybe the fact that I didn't achieve what I wanted kept me going.
And did you, through your career, did you need to recalibrate, or did you, so the end of a season to the next season, what was your process in that, say, month, 5, 6 weeks, whatever, where you took some time off? Were you immediately ready for the next season, or did you have to, did you sit down and go, right, do I want to do this? Do I want to make this sacrifice? How did that work?
I remember Pierre Harper said to me once, he thought in his career that a good season was often followed by a slightly weaker one. It can be quite hard to replicate it. I certainly noticed there were a few crashes. You generally build up, you'd take a rest in the summer, of course. You'd need to rest. You can't just train continuously. But you'd get better and better, and then all of a sudden there'd be a bit of a crash or injury or burnout or something, and then you'd build up again. It's very hard, just to keep it steady. But I made sure I kept all the data on myself. I kept training diaries, and after a while I sort of had an idea of the best way to rest, the best way to build up, when to start.
There's a lot of conversation with our athletes about training diaries and planning and proper planning. What was your process during that in terms of what you journal and what you write down?
Well, the reason I started it, I was at a conference once with loads of British athletes of all sports, and they made a joke about some idiot not keeping a training diary. I thought, well, I don't keep a training diary. And the guy was sort of saying, well, don't you want to know what you did last year and what you were running, what results you got? So I started keeping a training diary, just a very rudimentary.
Because that was normal for everyone else.
It was normal, especially in track and field, and in fencing I hadn't done it. But so after every session, I started writing down the footwork I did, physical conditioning, the lesson time, the amount of fights, the 15 and 5, and the amount of victories and defeats. Just very rudimentary. I mean, you could keep more and more data if you want to write an essay after each training session. But I kept that, and then I started to graph that with the results I got, and I found a very clear pattern. If I started training too hard, too early, I'd burn out on the way up to a competition. So there was a real window to get the sharpness there, which were weeks 2, 3, and 4 before the competition. And then 2 weeks before, you'd sort of taper down. The week before, I'd hardly do anything, a bit of stretching, slight lesson, sharp lesson, maybe a lesson the day before the competition, just to get over the jet lag and whilst everyone's fencing in the pool. But there were some real patterns, and once I realised there were patterns, I could then follow it.
Good.
But that doesn't mean that pattern would work for everyone else, but there would be some pattern.
But I think it's the argument that is you do need to have an understanding of what it is you're doing. My memory of that as well was being able to reflect on that, to go back and you say, look over and go, what worked well, and also a sense of confidence to know that you have done all of that training. Yeah, I did the same. I kept all my training diaries, but I was able to, the couple of days before, when I was, the days when you're resting, just read through them, remind yourself what worked well, what didn't work well, and I think that gave a confidence going into the competition. Good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the last thing I won was, and here's the medal, the Prince Takamada Trophy. I remember I beat Garozzo and then Imboden in the final. Very tough draw, actually. I remember I had Chupinic, I had Potty, I had Chamley Watson. It wasn't an easy day's fencing in terms of the draw. And I won that, which then made me the first ever British fencer to become world #1. Just for 2 weeks, but still, I'm pleased that I occupied that spot.
Where does that stand in terms of your satisfaction, achievement?
That's very satisfying because that shows a consistency over the 10 tours.
There's an argument that is more significant than any medals. To actually say at that moment you are the best in the world over, and
I agree. I think it's possible to feel good on the day, win a competition, but to keep doing that. And I had to do a lot of stuff to do this. I mean, I had a silver medal from the World Champs. I had a victory in Shanghai Grand Prix, victory in Bonn, victory in Tokyo, and then a few 16s. And then I only just became world #1 ahead of Facconi. So, to be honest, I saw that coming a few competitions back. I remember after winning Bonn, we were calculating, have I done it? And I just missed out. And then I remember we went to Paris and I fenced well, but I lost to Meinhardt 15-14. I thought, it's doable. And then, I won this, and then that made it decisive.
I think to be the world, it used to be the World Cup winner at the end of the season, or to be #1, at any given time is, I think, is probably the pinnacle of it all.
To do it at the end of the season is sort of neater, it wraps up one season, but the way the ranking works, it still is a rolling ranking, so you still have the 10 competitions counting. So yeah, that was a good thing. And I've left the rest of this blank, and I'm going to put here this interview. When it goes out in the sword, I'll put that in there, and then that will wrap up the whole thing.
Okay, so Richard, quite an amazing journey, amazing story. As a privilege for me to be discussing it with you, and for everyone to be watching and listening. What are you, as I know you're there's lots of different facets to your personality. What are if you could reflect on what it is that has helped you be hugely successful? And let's remember, world silver medalist, world #1, 9 major championships. I suspect there's a bucket load of medals at home that you haven't even discussed. You casually just said a few bronzes and a few silvers. For most people, that would be happy die, go to heaven moment. What is it that has? Have you been able to? Maybe you haven't had a chance, or have you had a chance to reflect on what it is that has made you so successful?
I'm a very disagreeable person. I don't go with the flow. I don't go with the sheep. Okay. I do what I do, and I sometimes get laughed at. But I think you have to, see what's right and just go for it. And in life it's so easy to just go with the crowd, go with the herd, but then you don't really get anything. In order to, so with my fencing career, I really analysed it. I really decided, what kind of style I was going to use. I looked elsewhere for inspiration, and also I just racked up the miles. I mean, let's face it, with any Olympic sport, you need to get in the mileage. Fencing's no different to swimming, where they get up early in the morning, they do a few hours, and then you do a few hours after school. You really have to just clock up the time on the piste learning the sport. But yeah, I was quite a dogged, determined person, and just not afraid to speak my mind and do my own thing.
I think you're being unfair to yourself and disagreeable. I think that it's about the context that we have to allow our athletes to challenge. We should be challenging the athletes around performance, but I think it's something we need to learn from, that we allow our athletes, we ask the athletes to be responsible. We ask the athletes to do that process in conjunction with their team. And there's that reinvention. You always strike me as somebody who would, no matter what you have achieved, and at that moment you're looking to refresh and renew. Where did you get that inspiration? Is that just your inquisitive nature?
I think, yeah, inquisitive nature. I mean, if you look at the last regime that was in, I was always at loggerheads with them. We were both trying to find the same goal ultimately. I was trying to maximise my potential as an athlete. They were trying to maximise the results for British fencing. They had one thing they wanted, I had another thing, and I didn't bow to them. We were actually butting heads quite a lot. But I'm pleased I spoke up for myself, and I'm pleased I tried to force my own training plan on the program, and I think that's paid dividends really with the results I got.
And would that be something in terms of, as we look forward, is that something that you reflection back to the athletes for the future, to get that balance right about understanding there's a system, but to work within a system, but there needs to be enough flexibility?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I look at my career, the first 6, 7, 8 years, it was very much a one-way radio. There was a right and wrong way to do things. My coach Jamek was just saying, right, do this, do that. Then after a while, I started to challenge things, like, why can't I do it like this? And it's like if you learn mathematics at school, when you're a kid, you're just told to do this in GCSEs or A-levels. It's a very robotic subject, mechanical. And then at a higher level, it's a very creative subject, And it was like that with fencing, one-way radio, and then all of a sudden I started to challenge things. And I would encourage the kids as well. Listen to your coaches, but don't be afraid to challenge what they're telling you, and try and make your own style that fits. I mean, don't forget, my style was nothing like you would see in a textbook. But then there are loads of fencers that also were in the same boat. Sanzo, Yopik, they didn't look like, the classical fencer you get in a textbook, but it was incredibly successful. And I remember once I used to really want to have a classical style. I used to watch someone like Nasser Boulin, his amazing footwork, and I tried to copy him and get that style with me, and it really didn't suit me. So I had to fit my own style around my own body and do what I was good at. So, for example, like someone like Marcus Mepstead, his body is completely different to mine. He's got short legs, short torso. He can sit down, glue in, keep the legs bent. But for me, this would, if I fenced like that, that would be terrible. But also, if he fenced like I did, dancing around like Muhammad Ali, it probably wouldn't it wouldn't benefit him.
And how did you work that out with Jemek then? Is it almost that you earn the right to be able to have that conversation?
Jemek, actually, as far as coaches go, he's quite liberal. He actually had the philosophy that he wanted to bring his fencers through developing their own style. And, you know, it got some criticism because some people would criticize him saying, he's letting mistakes go unchallenged. But then if you take that to the extreme, like what you get with a typical Eastern European coach, you get them coming out of, you know, these Eastern Bloc countries like it's a fencing factory, isn't it? They all look exactly the same. They're doing good, you know, strong stuff, but his philosophy was to sort of allow the individual flair to come through. So if you look at his fencers over the years, you know, you get so many different styles emerging. So I think that was actually quite a good thing that he promoted.
What does it feel like when it's really working?
It's amazing. Yeah.
Can you give us the colours, the smells?
Yeah, it's incredible. So sometimes I can fence. You know, I'm virtually doing it with my eyes closed. I can make conversations with the referee, make jokes to people on the sideline. I can't miss. And then other days, I'm putting all my resources into fencing and I can't win. You just have to accept that. That's a variation in the sort of human brain. I've heard other sportsmen talk about the same thing. You know, tennis players say they try and hit the ball. Sometimes it's like a grapefruit. No matter where they try and hit, it's always in the middle of the racket. It's easy. Other days it's like a grape. It's gone. Yeah. And that kind of variation was very frustrating at first. But then towards the end, I just accepted it. And I did a season knowing I'd probably win 2 World Cups. I'd go out in the first round, 2 World Cups, and everything else would be in between. You know, I viewed it like an insurance company. This is what we're going to get. So I lost that sort of emotional engagement. But, I mean, it does feel like early in my career, every defeat felt like a breakup. Every win felt like, you know, the best drug you could do, absolute euphoria. And then at the end, I sort of just distanced myself from that and just did it mechanically.
Excellent. And it is a sport that's a real leveler, you know, that the reality is if there's a competition, there's only one person goes home happy, really. Yeah. And I think it's putting that into context. What's next? What do you feel like is next? Have you time to reflect on? Yeah,
well, I've got a lot of things in the pipeline. I'm looking to move into a more full-time role here in Southpool. I've been, doing 2 nights a week, but now I'm retired. I'm going to move up to probably 4 or 5 nights a week and start taking kids to competitions and developing the club here. In discussion with British Fencing as to whether I can be involved with a men's foil program and to what extent. I'm very happy to, give my knowledge to the country. And also Karim Bashir was looking to get me in the commentary box now and then to commentate on some of the World Cups. So I'm pleased to still have a way to stay in the community. It's very difficult to just leave the community. I had a few friends that did that. They spent 20 years in fencing, then all of a sudden they went and did something else, and they said it was like going cold turkey, very strange. So I'm pleased I'll be able to stay in the community.
There was a fencer of my generation, István Sela, who won a medal with the Hungarian team. And when he decided to retire, he packed up his bag and took it to Marguerite, the bridge, sorry, Elizabeth Marguerite Bridge, and just chucked it into the water. And that was it. He sent his fencing bag, and that was him finished. Yeah. But I think, are you intending to just sort of decondition by just keeping yourself doing a bit of exercise, taking over, doing enough just to?
I think it's in the blood. With all fencers, I want to stay fit. I cycled here today. I brought all this stuff in I bought one of those, what's it called, a little trailer for kids.
Yeah, pannier type. Okay.
Yeah, a little trailer on the back, so I put it all in there. Good. So yeah, I still do a bit of running, a bit of cycling. I think if it's in the blood, that's good. I don't want to turn out to be one of these fencing coaches that ends up with a massive gut and gives a lesson in the flip-flops, has a heart attack at 45.
No, we don't want to go there. No, I think it's really important. I think all of what I'm feeling in the conversations we've had about this is you're in a very positive space, reflecting and really enjoying what you have achieved, and that hopefully that will continue.
I think at the time, you have to keep critiquing yourself. You're never happy. You aim for perfection, and you never get there because it's impossible. But you achieve excellence en route.
Yes.
But at the time, you're not happy. But now it's all, it's done. It's finished.
And to me, it's like listening to a different conversation because you're seeing it through a different lens, and you're listening through a different lens in the sense that the conversations around and I suppose this is the transition from fencer to coach potentially, that you look at things slightly differently. You take all that experience and you look at it through different
Absolutely.
wars.
And, you know, you can see that in a lot of successful sportsmen. You remember Michael Schumacher when he retired, you know, he went from being so focused to, you know, a bit more happy to talk, mess around. Steve Davis as well.
Yeah.
He was quite a dislikable character as a snooker player because he was so focused. And then as a commentator, you know, really nice bloke. So once it's done, I think, you know, you can start to modify your personality, start to reflect and be happy with, you know, with what you've got.
And the other things, the music and the other interests you have outside.
Oh, I've got a whole range.
Give us a quick flavour of what does a night in the Kruse household look like?
Well, a night in the Kruse household. Oh, nice. Netflix.
Bit of guitar,
bagpipes.
bagpipes.
I found that when you're a professional athlete, you can't spend the whole time. You can't do 9 till 5 in the fencing style. It just doesn't work like that. It's too much. So you have to do something else. You can't just go home and just, you know, watch TV. You get a little bit depressed if you did that. You have to still force yourself to do things you don't want to do. But it's a great opportunity. Force yourself to learn languages, learn instruments, martial arts, hobbies, travel, you know, all sorts of things. So, yeah, I had a whole range of interests.
Yeah, and the bagpipes is...
Bagpipes, yeah. I started playing bagpipes before I started fencing, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, back in '93, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
Scottish heritage.
Yeah, I've got a bit of Scottish heritage. Yeah.
Well, and I think the bit that, you know, the backdrop to all of this is the travel, the amazing travel and the journeys and the journaling you've done of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, by staying in the fencing community, will be the opportunity to continue to do that.
It is an incredible perk travelling. I mean, it's quite a lot of effort when you travel because, you know, you're prone to getting ill, being ripped off by people. It's a little bit stressful, but it's amazing the places you can go. And that's one of the ways I stayed fresh in fencing. I started to do little, you know, trips on the back of the fencing trips. So you did the work first, and then once you were already there with the funding, you could then go and visit, you know, weird and wonderful places. And yeah, absolute.
Any idea how many countries? Have you ever added it up?
Yeah, about 65. But it depends how you count it.
Okay.
So if you count an airport, it's another thing. But then what about an airport like Canada where you get the stamp, but you don't leave the building?
No, landside. Has to be landside. You're actually out in the country.
Yeah.
Through immigration.
What about England, Northern Ireland, Scotland? The home countries, are they countries or not? It depends how you count it.
Okay.
Hong Kong, Macau, are they different countries?
Okay, yeah.
Gibraltar, is that
we'll get a rough figure of 65.
65 is a sort of approximation, so, you know, it's about a third of the countries.
Favourite one, any particular, favourite continent, favourite country?
You know, my favourite country is here.
Okay.
Wherever I go, I'm so happy to come back here.
Nice.
It's just where I'm from, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to visit?
To visit, I like a trip to Cuba.
Okay.
You know, and I've got an excuse to go there. That's why I married her.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Richard, genuinely, I'm sure everyone finishing an interview saying it's been a privilege for me to be part of the journey, and
thanks, Johnny.
I will treasure those being close to you winning those competitions, and thank you for welcoming into your world. And let's keep you involved, and let's use all that experience and knowledge.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.